The deep space monitoring station floated silently in the void between Jupiter and Saturn. Commander Tae-min had been staring at the same star charts for 6 hours straight. His coffee had gone cold long ago, but he barely noticed. Something was wrong with the readings. At first, he thought it was equipment failure. The sensors were picking up massive energy signatures at the edge of the solar system, but the numbers were impossible. Nothing that big should exist in space. Tae-min rubbed his tired eyes and checked the readings again. Still there. Still impossible. He called his assistant over. "Do you see this?" he asked, pointing at the screen. The younger man looked confused. "Sir, these readings show something huge coming toward us. Like really huge." "How huge?" "The computer says it's about the size of a small moon." "But that can't be right." Tae-min felt his stomach drop. He had been monitoring space for 15 years. He knew what asteroids looked like. He knew what ships looked like. This was neither. "Run a full-spectrum analysis," he ordered. "I want to know what we're looking at." The results came back 30 minutes later. The readings showed not one object, but thousands. They were moving in perfect formation. They were made of metal and other artificial materials. And they were all heading straight for Earth. "Sir," his assistant said quietly, "I think these are ships." Tae-min stared at the screen. The formation was massive beyond belief. If each dot on the screen was a ship, there had to be over 10,000 of them, maybe more. He reached for the emergency communication panel. His hands shook as he entered the priority code that would alert Earth Command immediately. "This is Deep Station 7, he said into the microphone. "We have an emergency. Unknown fleet approaching Sol system. Estimate 10,000 plus vessels. Request immediate orders." The response came back within minutes. "Deep Station 7, confirm your readings. 10,000 vessels." "Confirmed," Tae-min replied. "They're big, they're organized, and they're coming fast." On Earth, Captain So-young was having lunch when the alert came through. She dropped her sandwich and ran to the command center. As head of Earth's diplomatic corps, she had always known this day might come. Humanity had wondered for decades if they were alone in the universe. Now they had their answer. The command center was chaos. Officers ran back and forth, shouting orders and updating displays. Admiral Hyun-woo stood in the center of it all, calm as a statue. "Report," So-young said as she approached him. "Unknown alien fleet," Hyun-woo replied without looking away from the main screen. "Bigger than anything we've ever imagined. They'll reach Earth in 72 hours. So-young studied the tactical display. The alien ships were massive, each. One was larger than Earth's biggest space station. And there were so many of them. "Have they tried to communicate?" she asked. "Nothing. Complete radio silence." So-young felt a chill run down her spine. In every first contact scenario they had planned for, the aliens at least tried to talk first. Silence usually meant only one thing. "Sir," a communications officer called out, "we're picking up transmissions from the alien fleet." "Put it on speakers," Hyun-woo ordered. The voice that filled the command center was deep and harsh. It spoke in a language no human had ever heard before. But the tone was clear enough. It was not friendly. "Are we recording this?" So-young asked. "Yes, ma'am. Our computers are already working on translation." They listened to the alien chatter for several minutes. Gradually, patterns began to emerge. The translation software started picking up repeated words and phrases. "I think I have something," the communications officer announced. The word that keeps coming up translates roughly to harvest or collection. So-young and Hyun-woo exchanged glances. That was not a good sign. "What about human or Earth?" Hyun-woo asked. They refer to us as the soft ones and Earth as the blue feeding ground. The blood drained from So Young's face. This was worse than an invasion. This was extermination. More translations came in over the next hour. The aliens called themselves the Kelrian Empire. They had conquered dozens of worlds before Earth. They spoke of humans like farmers talked about livestock. The alien fleet's leader was someone called War Marshal Vextar. From what they could understand, he was bragging to his officers about how easy this conquest would be. Humans were weak, he said, primitive, no real weapons or defenses. He's wrong about that, Hyunwoo said quietly. Is he? So Young asked. Look at those ships. We have nothing that can fight something like that. Hyunwoo was quiet for a long moment. Then he turned to her with a strange expression on his face. Captain, I want you to send them a message. What kind of message? A warning. So Young stared at him. Sir, with respect, what good will a warning do? They have 10,000 warships. Send it anyway. Tell them to turn around and leave our system. Tell them that if they attack Earth, there will be consequences. And if they ignore it? Hyunwoo's expression grew cold. Then they'll learn why humans survived on a planet full of predators for millions of years. So Young didn't understand what he meant, but she followed orders. She composed a formal diplomatic message and broadcast it toward the alien fleet. To the Kelrian Empire, the message began. This is Captain So Young of Earth Command. You are entering our solar system without permission. We demand that you turn around and leave immediately. If you attack our world or our people, you will face the consequences of your actions. This is your only warning. The message was transmitted on all frequencies in both human languages and the alien language their computers had decoded. On the lead Kelrian ship, War Marshal Vextar listened to the human message and started laughing. His officers joined in. The idea of these primitive creatures threatening the mighty Kelrian Empire was hilarious. Reply to them, Vextar ordered. Tell them we accept their surrender. But the humans sent no surrender. Instead, they repeated their warning, and then they went silent. Vextar studied the readings from Earth. The planet had some orbital stations and a few small ships, but nothing that could challenge even one Kelrian vessel. The humans were clearly desperate. Sir, one of his officers said, should we be concerned about their warning? Vexitar's laughter echoed through the bridge. Officer, we have conquered 47 star systems. We have destroyed entire civilizations. What could one small planet possibly do to us? The Kelrian fleet continued toward Earth, confident in their overwhelming superiority. They had no idea that hidden sensors throughout the solar system were tracking their every move. They didn't know that their communications were being monitored and decoded by systems far more advanced than they realized. Most importantly, they had no idea that Earth's real defenses were not the few ships and stations they could see. Humanity's true strength lay hidden in places the Kelrians would never think to look. The 72-hour countdown had begun. Earth appeared defenseless and alone, but appearances could be very deceiving. In bunkers deep beneath Earth's surface, Admiral Hyunwoo was making phone calls to people whose names appeared on no official records, people who had been waiting decades for this exact moment. The Kelrians had ignored humanity's warning. Soon they would learn the price of that mistake. Engineer Ji-hoon wiped sweat from his forehead as he worked inside the orbital defense platform. The massive structure hung in space above Earth like a metal moon. To anyone watching, it looked like a peaceful research station. But Ji-hoon knew better. "How much time do we have?" asked his assistant, crawling out from behind a control panel. 58 hours, Ji-hoon replied, checking his watch. "The alien fleet is moving faster than we expected." He looked through the small window at Earth below. The planet looked so peaceful from up here. Blue oceans, white clouds, green continents. It was hard to believe that thousands of alien warships were racing toward them with plans to destroy everything. Ji-hoon had been working on these platforms for 10 years. Officially, they were weather monitoring stations. The public thought they studied storms and tracked climate data. But their real purpose was much more important. "Are the power cores online?" he asked. "All 12 cores are running at full capacity," his assistant confirmed. "We could power half of Europe with this much energy." "Good. We're going to need every bit of it." Meanwhile, the Kelrian fleet continued its approach. War Marshal Vextar stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching Earth grow larger on the main screen. His officers moved around him with calm efficiency. They had done this many times before. "Status report," Vextar commanded. "All ships are in formation," reported Fleet Admiral Noxra. "Weapons are charged and ready. The humans have sent no further communications." "Of course they haven't," Vextar said with amusement. "They realize how hopeless their situation is." Noxra pulled up intelligence reports on his personal screen. "Our scouts confirm that Earth has only primitive defenses, a few orbital stations, some small patrol ships, nothing that could threaten us." "What about their military?" "Laughable. They still use chemical rockets to reach space. Their weapons are kinetic projectiles and simple energy beams. Our shields can stop anything they might throw at us." Vextar nodded approvingly. This would be one of their easiest conquests. The Kelrian Empire had faced real resistance before. Some species had powerful weapons or strong defenses. Others had tried to hide or run. But humans seemed to be doing neither. "Sir," the communications officer announced, "we're intercepting human transmissions. Put them on speaker." The bridge filled with human voices speaking in various languages. Most of it seemed to be normal civilian chatter. People talking about work, family, daily life. There was no panic, no military coordination, no emergency preparations. "They're acting like nothing is happening," Noxra observed. "Either they're incredibly brave or incredibly stupid." "My money is on stupid," Vextar replied. "Keep monitoring their communications. I want to know if they try to organize any kind of defense." On Earth, Dr. Yunji was working in a laboratory that didn't officially exist. It was buried 3 miles beneath the mountains of South Korea, connected to similar facilities around the world by tunnels that appeared on no government maps. "How are the preparations going?" asked her colleague, Dr. Park. "Almost finished," Yunji replied, not looking up from her work. "All the pieces are in place. We just need to activate them when the time comes." She was calibrating a device that looked like a simple computer terminal. But the technology inside was decades ahead of anything the public had ever seen. It was connected to a network that spanned the entire solar system. "The Kelrians have no idea what they're walking into," Dr. Park said. "Let's hope it stays that way," Yunji replied. "The longer they underestimate us, the better our chances." Above ground, the world seemed normal. People went to work, children went to school, life continued as usual. But beneath the surface, humanity was preparing for war in ways the Kelrians could never imagine. In orbit, Ji-hoon finished his work on the defense platform. To alien sensors, it would look like a harmless research station until the very last moment. By then, it would be too late for them to react. "All systems are ready," he reported to Earth Command. Confirmed, came the reply. Maintain cover protocols until activation order. The alien fleet was now close enough that people on Earth could see them with telescopes. They looked like a cloud of tiny stars moving across the sky. News reporters tried to interview government officials, but received only vague statements about monitoring the situation. War Marshal Vextar was pleased with the lack of resistance. These humans are even weaker than our intelligence suggested, he told his officers. They're not even trying to fight. Perhaps they plan to surrender, suggested Battle Captain Kresheva. If they do, we'll accept their surrender and harvest them anyway, Vextar replied coldly. The Empire needs new slaves for the mining colonies. The Kelrians had perfected the art of conquest over centuries. They would destroy military targets first, then occupy major population centers. Any humans who survived would be shipped off to work in alien mines and factories until they died. But as they drew closer to Earth, some of their sensors began picking up strange readings. There were energy signatures coming from various points around the planet that didn't match their intelligence reports. "Sir," the sensor operator called out, "I'm detecting unusual power levels from several Earth installations." "What kind of power levels?" "Much higher than expected for primitive technology. But it could just be their power plants working at full capacity." Vextar wasn't concerned. Even if the humans had more advanced technology than expected, the Kelrian fleet was still overwhelmingly superior in numbers and firepower. "Maintain course," he ordered. "All ships prepare for orbital bombardment." 24 hours remained until the alien fleet reached Earth. In space stations and underground bunkers, humans made final preparations for a war the Kelrians thought would be over before it began. Dr. Yunji activated the first phase of the defense network. Signals raced through hidden cables and quantum transmitters, reaching every corner of the solar system. Ancient protocols that had been sleeping for decades suddenly came online. "All stations report ready," she announced to Admiral Hyun-woo. "Excellent. Remember, we only get one chance at this. If they realize what we're really capable of before we're ready, the whole plan falls apart." "Understood, sir. All personnel know their roles." High above Earth, Ji-hoon watched the alien fleet grow larger on his screens. Soon they would be close enough to see Earth's defenders clearly. They would count the small number of human ships and orbital platforms. They would calculate the odds and decide the battle was already won. That would be their first mistake. But it wouldn't be their last. The Kelrian Empire had conquered dozens of worlds by being stronger and more advanced than their enemies. They had never faced an opponent who was stronger but pretending to be weak. They had never encountered a species that had spent decades preparing for this exact moment. In 18 hours, War Marshal Vextar would learn that humans were not the primitive, helpless creatures he believed them to be. But by then, his fleet would already be trapped in a web they could never escape. The countdown continued. Earth waited, and in the darkness of space, humanity's true defenses began to wake up. Battle Captain Kresheva commanded the Kelrian vanguard as it reached Earth's outer defense perimeter. His squadron consisted of 50 heavy battleships, each one capable of destroying a small moon. Behind him, the main fleet spread across space, like a deadly constellation. "Initial scan complete," reported his tactical officer. "Detecting 12 human vessels approaching our position." Kresheva looked at the display with amusement. 12 ships against 50. The humans were either incredibly brave or completely insane. "What class are they?" "Unknown design, sir. They appear to be outdated patrol vessels. No significant armor or weapons detected." This is almost insulting, Kreshova muttered. Are they seriously trying to fight us with those toys? The human ships moved in loose formation, looking clumsy and unprofessional compared to the precise Kelrian battle line. Their hulls were scarred and patched, suggesting they were old and poorly maintained. On the lead human ship, Captain Dong-hyun watched the alien vessels with careful eyes. His ship looked like scrap metal from the outside, but he knew better. So did his crew. All ships, maintain formation, he broadcast to his small fleet. Remember, we need to look desperate until the last possible moment. Sir, his weapons officer said quietly, they're targeting us with their main guns. Let them. They won't expect what's coming. The Kelrian ships powered up their weapons. Each battleship carried enough firepower to level a city. 50 of them together could probably destroy Earth's entire visible fleet in one coordinated strike. Sir, Kreshva's communications officer announced, the humans are transmitting. Put it through. Captain Dong-hyun's voice filled the Kelrian. Bridge. Alien vessels. This is the Earth Defense Force. You are trespassing in our space. Turn around immediately, or we will be forced to defend ourselves. The Kelrian bridge erupted in laughter. The idea of these primitive ships threatening their mighty battleships was beyond ridiculous. Reply to them, Kreshva ordered. Tell them they have 60 seconds to surrender before we destroy them. But the human ships didn't surrender. Instead, they continued their approach, looking determined despite the hopeless odds. 30 seconds to firing range, the tactical officer reported. Charge all weapons, Kreshova commanded. Prepare to destroy them. At exactly the 30-second mark, something impossible happened. The human ships suddenly accelerated to speeds that should have been physically impossible for vessels of their apparent technology level. They moved like fighters instead of heavy patrol ships. What the hell? Kreshova shouted. How are they moving that fast? Before anyone could answer, the human ships opened fire. But instead of the primitive weapons the Kelrians expected, beams of pure energy lanced out from hidden weapon ports. The beams cut through Kelrian shields like they weren't even there. 3. Battleships exploded in the first volley. Impossible! Kreshova screamed. Our shields are the most advanced in the galaxy! Sir, they're using some kind of quantum disruptor technology, his science officer reported in panic. It's bypassing our shields completely. Commander Insu smiled grimly as he watched alien ships die on his tactical display. His vessel, the Soul's Pride, looked like a rust bucket from the outside. Inside, it carried weapons technology that was decades ahead of anything the Kelrians had. All ships execute Pattern 7, he broadcast. Time to show them what humans can really do. The human fleet split into 3 groups, moving with impossible coordination. They danced around the Kelrian battleships like they were standing still, firing precisely targeted shots that crippled engines and weapon systems. On the Kelrian flagship, War Marshal Vextar watched the battle unfold with growing horror. His vanguard was being systematically destroyed by ships that should have been scrap metal. Get me a status report, he roared. 15 ships destroyed, 23 severely damaged, Fleet Admiral Noxra reported. The humans are using technology we've never seen before. That's impossible. Our intelligence said they were primitive. Sir, our intelligence was wrong. These ships are more advanced than anything we've encountered. Vextar stared at the battle display. The human vessels moved, like they weren't bound by normal physics. Their weapons cut through the best Kelrian defenses without effort, and there were only 12 of them. Sir, the communications officer called out. "We're receiving a transmission from the human fleet." "Put it through." Captain Dong-hyun's voice filled the bridge again, but this time there was no desperation in his tone. "Kelrian fleet, this is your second warning. Leave our system now or face the consequences." "Second warning?" Vexatar sputtered. "What was the first?" "The message we sent 72 hours ago, the one you laughed at." The transmission cut off. On the screen, the human ships regrouped and began advancing toward the main Kelrian fleet. "Sir," Noxra said quietly, "perhaps we should reconsider our approach." "Absolutely not!" Vextar snapped. "We have 10,000 ships. They have 12. But, even as he said it, new contacts appeared on the sensors. More human vessels were emerging from behind asteroids and debris fields where they had been hiding. Each one looked different from the others, but they all moved with the same impossible grace and speed. Commander Insu opened a channel to Earth Command. "Initial engagement successful. Enemy vanguard neutralized. Proceeding to Phase 2. "Confirmed," came Admiral Hyun-woo's voice. "All stations, you are cleared to drop the masquerade." Across the solar system, human installations began revealing their true nature. The weather monitoring satellites suddenly bristled with weapon arrays. The research stations powered up shield generators and sensor networks. The mining platforms extended launch bays filled with fighters. In minutes, what had looked like a peaceful solar system full of civilian installations transformed into the most heavily defended star system the Kelrians had ever seen. "Sir," the Kelrian sensor operator whispered, "we're detecting over 3,000 human vessels throughout the system. They were hiding behind sensor dampeners." Vextar felt his blood run cold. 3,000? "And sir, some of them are bigger than our dreadnoughts." On his command ship, Captain Dong-hyun smiled as he watched more human vessels decloak around the Kelrian fleet. For 50 years, humanity had been preparing for this moment. They had built weapons, in secret, trained crews in hidden bases, and developed technology that would surprise even their closest allies. "All ships," he broadcast to the expanding human fleet, "welcome to the real war." The Kelrians had expected to face a primitive civilization with outdated weapons and no real defenses. Instead, they found themselves surrounded by a force that was not only their equal, but potentially their superior. Battle Captain Kresheva looked at the remains of his vanguard and realized the terrible truth. The humans hadn't been unprepared for war. They had been waiting for it. "Sir," his surviving tactical officer said, "what are your orders?" Kresheva stared at the human fleet growing larger around them. For the first time in his military career, he was genuinely afraid. "Send a message to the War Marshal," he said quietly. "Tell him we may have made a serious mistake." The battle for Earth had begun, but not the way anyone in the Kelrian Empire had expected. The hunters had become the hunted, and they were only just beginning to understand how badly they had miscalculated. Dr. Su Jin stood in the Quantum Communication Center buried beneath Geneva. The room was filled with technology that officially didn't exist. Massive quantum processors hummed quietly, while holographic displays showed star charts spanning half the galaxy. "Are all stations ready?" she asked her team. "Confirming connections now," replied her assistant. "We have secure links to stations in 47 star systems." 47? Dr. Sujin smiled. "The Kelrians think they've conquered 47 systems. They have no idea we've been watching them from the beginning." She activated the primary transmitter. Across the galaxy, hidden human outposts began receiving the activation signal. Colonies that had been disguised as asteroid mining operations suddenly revealed massive military complexes. Research stations that claimed to study cosmic radiation powered up weapons that could destroy planets. Lieutenant Wu Seok received the signal at his command post in the asteroid belt. His installation looked like a simple mining platform from the outside. But beneath the rocky exterior lay one of humanity's most advanced military bases. "All squads, this is Base Commander," he announced. "Operation Revelation is a go. Drop all cover protocols." Around him, the asteroid began to transform. Hidden panels slid away to reveal launch bays filled with fighters. Mining equipment retracted to make room for massive railguns. The entire rock became a fortress in space. "Sir," his tactical officer reported, "we have 30 Kelrian ships in sensor range. They have no idea we're here." "Perfect. Prepare for surprise attack. Target their engines first. We want prisoners." Similar scenes played out across the solar system. What the Kelrians had thought was empty space suddenly filled with human vessels appearing from nowhere. Cloaking devices shut down, revealing ships that had been stalking the alien fleet for hours. On the Kelrian flagship, War Marshal Vexitar watched his tactical display with growing panic. Red dots representing human forces were appearing everywhere. His fleet, which had seemed overwhelmingly powerful just hours ago, was now surrounded. "How many ships do they have?" he demanded. "Current count is over 5,000, Fleet Admiral Noxra replied shakily. "And more are still appearing." 5,000? Where did they come from? "Sir, they were hiding throughout the system. Our sensors never detected them. Admiral Kyung-ho commanded the human battle fleet from his flagship, the Incheon Thunder." Unlike the rusty patrol ships the Kelrians had first encountered, his vessel was clearly a warship. It was 3 times larger than the biggest Kelrian battleship and armed with weapons that glowed with barely contained energy. "Open a channel to the alien fleet," he ordered. "Channel open, sir. Kelrian War Marshal Vextar, this is Admiral Kyung-ho of the Earth Defense Force. We have been monitoring your empire's activities for the past 50 years. We know about every world you've conquered, every species you've enslaved, every atrocity you've committed." The transmission reached the Kelrian flagship. Vexitar listened with growing disbelief. 50 years, he whispered. "Impossible. We only discovered Earth 5 years ago." Admiral Kyung-ho continued his broadcast. "We have observed your tactics, studied your technology, and prepared countermeasures for every weapon in your arsenal. We placed monitoring stations in systems you thought were secure. We contacted species you thought were extinct. We have been ready for this day since before your scouts ever found our world." "Sir," the Kelrian communications officer said urgently, "we're receiving data streams from multiple sources. They're sending us tactical information about our own fleet." The main screen filled with detailed schematics of Kelrian ships, complete with weapon specifications and shield frequencies. But more disturbing were the personnel files. The humans had detailed information about Kelrian officers, their families, their home planets. "How do they know all this?" Vexitar asked in horror. "Sir," Noxra said quietly, "I think they've been infiltrating our territory for decades." Dr. Su-Jin watched the data transmission with satisfaction. Humanity's intelligence network had taken generations to build. Agents had posed as traders, explorers, and refugees to gather information throughout Kelrian space. "Show them File 7, she instructed her team. The Kelrian fleet received a new data package. This one contained detailed maps of their home system. including the locations of military bases and government facilities. The humans knew everything. "This is impossible," Vextar muttered. "No one has this kind of intelligence on us." Lieutenant Wusiok led his surprise attack on the Kelrian rear guard. His fighters emerged from the asteroid field like a swarm of angry insects. The aliens never saw them coming. "Disable their communications first," he ordered. "We don't want them warning the main fleet." The human fighters moved with precision that amazed even their pilots. Their ships were equipped with artificial intelligence that could predict enemy movements before they happened. Every shot hit exactly where it was supposed to. Within minutes, 20 Kelrian ships were drifting helplessly with their engines destroyed and their crews captured. "Sir," Wusiok's communications officer reported, "we're getting surrender signals from the remaining enemy ships. Accept their surrender. Transfer the crews to holding facilities on Base 7. The pattern repeated. Throughout the solar system, small groups of Kelrian ships found themselves outmaneuvered and overwhelmed by humans who seemed to know their every move before they made it. Admiral Kyung-ho opened another channel to the alien fleet. "War Marshal Vextar, you are beginning to understand your situation. Your empire believes it is the most powerful force in the galaxy, but you have never faced an opponent who spent decades studying you before you even knew they existed. What do you want?" Vextar finally asked. "Surrender, immediately and unconditionally." "Impossible! We are the Kelrian Empire. We do not surrender." "Then you will be destroyed. But first, let me show you something that might change your mind." The main screen in the Kelrian flagship activated, showing a live image from somewhere in space. It took Vextar a moment to recognize what he was seeing. "That's Kelria Prime," he whispered. "Our home world." "Correct. And those are human ships in orbit around it." The image zoomed in to show massive vessels surrounding the Kelrian home planet. They were clearly human designs, but larger and more advanced than anything in the current battle. "We have been in position around your capital for 6 months, Admiral Kyung-ho explained calmly. "Your government doesn't know we're there. Your military doesn't know we're there. We could have destroyed your entire civilization at any time, but we chose to wait." "Wait for what?" "For you to make the first move. Humans prefer peace, War Marshal. We would rather trade with other species than conquer them, but when someone threatens our home, we respond with overwhelming force." Dr. Su-Jin activated another part of the network. Across the galaxy, human agents began revealing themselves in Kelrian territories. Species that had been enslaved for generations suddenly found themselves armed with advanced weapons and supported by human advisors. "Sir," Noxera reported in a shaking voice, "we're receiving reports from across the Empire. There are rebellions breaking out on dozens of worlds, and they're all being supported by human forces." Vextar stared at the tactical displays, showing his empire beginning to collapse. The humans hadn't just prepared to defend Earth. They had prepared to destroy the entire Kelrian Empire. "How long?" he asked quietly. "How long have you been planning this?" Admiral Kyung-ho's voice carried a note of sadness. "Since the day we learned that intelligent life existed in the universe. We hoped we would meet peaceful neighbors, but we prepared for the alternative." The War Marshal looked around his bridge at the faces of his officers. They all showed the same expression, the dawning realization that they had made a terrible mistake. Humanity wasn't a primitive species ripe for conquest. They were a sleeping giant that the Kelrian Empire had been foolish enough to wake up. Captain J-Wan commanded the human ghost fleet as it emerged from hyperspace near the Kelrian supply depot at Proxima Station. His ships were invisible to enemy sensors, cloaked by technology the aliens couldn't even imagine. "Target acquired," his tactical officer reported. 17 supply ships and 4 escort vessels. "Any civilian traffic in the area?" "Negative, sir. All vessels are military." "Good. Begin the hunt." The Ghost Fleet consisted of 12 ships designed specifically for stealth operations. They could move through space without being detected by any known sensor technology. For the past 6 hours, they had been systematically destroying Kelrian supply lines across 3 star systems. Jaewon watched the alien depot through his ship's advanced sensors. The Kelrians were going about their business normally, completely, unaware that death was approaching them from the darkness. "Sir," the weapons officer said, "all ships report ready to fire." "Execute." Beams of concentrated energy lanced out from empty space. The Kelrian supply ships exploded one after another, their crews never knowing what hit them. The escort vessels tried to return fire, but they couldn't target enemies they couldn't see. Within 5 minutes, the entire depot was destroyed. The Ghost Fleet vanished back into hyperspace before any reinforcements could arrive. Commander Yoon Seo monitored Kelrian communications from her hidden station in the Vega system. She was a specialist in psychological warfare, and her job was to turn the aliens against each other. "Any interesting chatter today?" asked her assistant. "Oh, yes," Yoon Seo replied with a smile. "Listen to this." She played a recording of Kelrian officers arguing over their communications network. The voices were angry and desperate. "Fleet Admiral Corax is blaming Admiral Nexus for the supply losses," she explained. "Nexus is saying Corax is incompetent. Meanwhile, War General Threx thinks they're both traitors. Are any of them actually traitors?" "Not yet, but they will be soon." Yoon Seo activated her communication equipment. Using advanced voice simulation technology, she began broadcasting fake messages between Kelrian commanders. Each message was designed to increase suspicion and paranoia within their ranks. "Admiral Nexus," said a perfect imitation of Fleet Admiral Corax's voice, "I know about your secret communications with the humans. Surrender now, and I might spare your family." The fake message was intercepted by Kelrian security forces, just as Yoon Seo intended. Within hours, Admiral Nexus was under arrest for treason. His loyal officers began plotting to free him, creating even more chaos in the Kelrian command structure. "Sir," her assistant said admiringly, "you're destroying their entire chain of command without firing a shot." "The mind is the most powerful weapon," Yoon Seo replied. "Fear and suspicion can destroy an empire faster than any fleet." Engineer Solji worked in the control room of Research Station Alpha 7, located in what the Kelrians thought was empty space between star systems. The station was completely invisible to their sensors, hidden behind a combination of cloaking, fields, and holographic projectors. "Sir," her technician reported, "we have 3 Kelrian patrol ships approaching our position. Do they see us?" "Negative. They're following their normal patrol route." "Perfect. Are the weapon systems ready?" "All systems are online and targeted." Station Alpha 7 was one of hundreds of hidden military bases that humanity had built throughout Kelrian territory. They were disguised as research stations, mining platforms, or navigation beacons. The aliens had been flying past them for decades without ever realizing they were there. "Fire," Solgi ordered. The station's main weapon was a gravity cannon that could create localized black holes. The 3 Kelrian ships were crushed instantly, their wreckage pulled into the artificial singularity before disappearing completely. "Clean kill," the technician reported. "No survivors, no debris, no evidence." "Excellent. Report the engagement to Fleet Command and resume stealth protocols. Across Kelrian space, similar attacks were happening every few hours. Supply convoys vanished without a trace. Patrol ships simply disappeared. Communication relays went offline, for no apparent reason. The Kelrian military was starting to panic. Admiral Kyung-ho reviewed the battle reports from his flagship. The human campaign against the Kelrian Empire was proceeding exactly as planned. "Status report," he requested. "Sir," his intelligence officer began, "we have successfully destroyed 60% of their supply network. Their outer territories are already running low on fuel and ammunition." "What about their communications?" 75% of their long-range communication arrays have been eliminated. Most Kelrian commanders can't contact their superiors or coordinate with other units. "And the psychological warfare campaign?" "Extremely effective, sir. Commander Yoon Seo reports that 17 Kelrian admirals have been arrested for suspected treason. Their military command structure is in complete chaos." Kyung-ho nodded with satisfaction. The Kelrians had expected a simple conquest, but humanity had turned the invasion into a nightmare for the attackers. "Sir," the communications officer announced, "we're receiving a transmission from the Kelrian flagship." "Put it through." "War Marshal." Vextar's voice filled the bridge, and he sounded desperate. "Human fleet, this is War Marshal Vextar. I request an immediate ceasefire to discuss terms." "Put me through to him," Kyung-ho ordered. "Channel open, sir." "War Marshal, this is Admiral Kyung-ho. You are in no position to request anything. Your supply lines are cut, your communications are compromised, and your empire is in rebellion. Surrender now, or we will continue our attacks." "You don't understand," Vextar replied frantically. "We can't surrender. The Kelrian High Command will execute us for cowardice." "Then you should have thought of that before you invaded our system." "Please, there must be some way to resolve this." Peacefully, Kyung-ho considered the request. The human strategy was working perfectly, but the ultimate goal was to end the war with minimal casualties on both sides. "Very well," he said finally. "You have 24 hours to contact your high command and convince them to recall all Kelrian forces from human territory. If you succeed, we will consider a ceasefire. And if we can't convince them, then we will continue destroying your empire piece by piece until someone with authority decides to negotiate." The transmission ended. On the Kelrian flagship, Vextar stared at his tactical displays in despair. His invasion fleet was trapped in the Sol system, surrounded by superior human forces. His empire was under attack across dozens of worlds. And his own government would probably have him executed if he tried to surrender. "Sir," Fleet Admiral Noxra said quietly, "what are your orders?" "Contact the High Command," Vextar replied wearily. "Tell them we need immediate reinforcements." "Sir, with respect, I don't think reinforcements will help. The humans have been planning this for decades. They know everything about us, and we know almost nothing about them." Vextar knew his subordinate was right. The Kelrian Empire had walked into a trap that had been generations in the making. They were fighting an enemy who had studied them for 50 years while remaining completely hidden. Meanwhile, Captain Jaewon's Ghost Fleet struck another target. This time it was a major Kelrian base that served as a regional command center. The attack lasted only 10 minutes, but when it was over, the entire facility was destroyed, and 3,000 Kelrian officers were dead. The pattern continued across the galaxy. Invisible human ships appeared from nowhere, struck with devastating effectiveness, and vanished before the aliens could respond. It was like fighting ghosts. Commander Yoon Seo smiled as she listened to increasingly panicked Kelrian communications. The aliens were starting to shoot at their own ships, convinced that humans were somehow disguising themselves as Kelrians. "Sir," her assistant reported, "the Kelrian Third Fleet just destroyed 2 of their own cruisers because they thought they were human infiltrators." "Perfect," Yoon Seo replied. "Fear is making them destroy themselves. Soon they won't need our help to collapse." The hunter had indeed become the hunted. The Kelrian Empire, which had conquered dozens of worlds through overwhelming force, now found itself being systematically dismantled by an enemy that struck from the shadows and vanished like smoke. And the worst part was that they were beginning to realize this was just the beginning. Humanity had revealed only a fraction of their true capabilities. What other surprises were waiting in the darkness? War Marshal Vextar made his final desperate decision as he watched his empire crumble around him. If he couldn't conquer humanity through conventional warfare, he would destroy their home world directly. "All remaining ships," he broadcast to his scattered fleet, "converge on Earth immediately. We will punch through their defenses and reduce their planet to ash." "Sir," Fleet Admiral Noxra protested, "we've lost over half our forces. The humans have ships we can't even see." "I don't care," Vexitar roared. "We are the Kelrian Empire. We do not retreat from primitives." The surviving Kelrian ships began forming up for a final assault on Earth. 2,000 vessels remained from the original fleet of 10,000. They powered up their most devastating weapons and prepared for a suicide attack. On Earth, Dr. Hayrim monitored the approaching alien fleet from her control center beneath the Sahara Desert. The facility was hidden 3 miles underground, connected to defensive systems that spanned the entire planet. "They're coming straight at us," her assistant observed. "All ships, maximum firepower." "Let them come," Hayrim replied calmly. "It's time to show them why Earth has never been conquered." She activated her console, and across the planet, defensive installations that had been hidden for decades began revealing themselves. The Kelrians had seen Earth's orbital platforms and space stations. What they hadn't seen were the planetary defenses. Mountain peaks split open to reveal massive gun batteries. Hidden installations rose from the ocean floors. Defensive satellites that had posed as weather monitors powered up shield generators that could protect entire continents. "Sir," the Kelrian sensor operator called out in panic, "Earth's surface is lighting up with defensive installations, thousands of them." Vexitar stared at the tactical display. The planet below was transforming before his eyes. What had looked like a peaceful world was revealing itself to be the most heavily fortified target he had ever seen. "Impossible," he whispered. "How could they hide so many weapons?" "Sir, we're detecting planetary shield generators coming online. The entire planet is being surrounded by defensive barriers." Dr. Hayrim smiled as Earth's true defenses came online. The planetary shield system was humanity's greatest achievement in defensive technology. It could stop any weapon the Kelrians possessed, and it was powered by the planet's own rotation. "Shield strength at maximum," she reported to Earth Command. "All surface installations ready to fire." The Kelrian fleet reached Earth's orbital space and immediately came under attack from every direction. The hidden gun batteries opened fire with weapons that made their ship-mounted guns look like toys. Energy beams thick as skyscrapers lanced up from the surface, striking the alien vessels with incredible force. "Shields failing!" the Kelrian tactical officer screamed. "We can't stop those weapons!" "Return fire," Vexitar ordered. "Destroy their cities." But when the Kelrian weapons struck Earth's surface, they simply vanished against the planetary shields. The protective barriers absorbed every shot without even flickering, Admiral Song Min commanded the human liberation forces that were attacking Kelrian territories across the galaxy. While the alien fleet was trapped at Earth, his ships were freeing every world the Empire had conquered. Status report from the Perseus sector, his communications officer announced. 3 more worlds liberated, sir. The local populations are joining our forces. What about Kelrian resistance? Minimal. Most of their garrison forces are either fleeing or surrendering. The few that try to fight are quickly overwhelmed. Seong Min studied the tactical display showing human operations across dozens of star systems. The plan was working perfectly. While the Kelrians were focused on their doomed attack on Earth, humanity was dismantling their empire piece by piece. Sir, his intelligence officer reported, we're receiving surrender requests from 17 Kelrian governors. They're offering to turn over their territories in exchange for protection. Accept their surrenders, Xiongmin ordered. But make it clear that we expect full cooperation in transitioning to local self-government. The admiral smiled grimly. The Kelrian Empire had lasted for centuries, but it was collapsing in a matter of days. The species they had enslaved were eager to join forces with humanity against their former oppressors. Back at Earth, the battle was going badly for the Kelrians. Their ships were being destroyed faster than they could count, while Earth's defenses seemed completely invulnerable. Sir, Noxra reported desperately, we've lost 800 ships and haven't even scratched their planetary shields. Keep firing! Vexatar insisted. There has to be a weakness. But there was no weakness. Human engineers had spent decades designing Earth's defenses specifically to counter every known form of attack. The Kelrians were using weapons and tactics that humanity had already prepared for. Dr. Hayrim watched the alien fleet diminish with each passing minute. Part of her felt sorry for them. They had no idea how outmatched they were. Dr. Hayrim, came Admiral Hyun-woo's voice over the communicator. Are you ready for the final demonstration? Yes, sir. All systems are charged and ready. Proceed with Operation Daybreak. Hayrim activated the final component of Earth's defensive network. High above the planet, a network of satellites began focusing solar energy into a concentrated beam. The beam was invisible until it struck the first Kelrian ship. The massive alien dreadnought simply vanished. No explosion, no debris, just gone. The concentrated solar energy had broken down the ship's atomic structure at the molecular level. Sir, the Kelrian sensor operator stammered, the humans just deleted the Magnificent from existence. What do you mean, deleted? It's just gone, sir. Completely gone. Not destroyed, not damaged. Gone. Vextar felt his blood turn to ice. What kind of monsters were these humans? What kind of civilization could simply erase a ship from reality? The solar beam moved to the next target. Another dreadnought vanished without a trace. Then another. The weapon was systematically removing Kelrian ships from existence one by one. All ships retreat! Vextar finally screamed. Full retreat! But it was too late. Human ships that had been waiting in ambush positions throughout the solar system suddenly appeared, cutting off every escape route. The Kelrian fleet was completely surrounded. Admiral Kyung-ho opened a communication channel to the alien flagship. War Marshal Vextar, this is your final chance to surrender. Lay down your weapons and prepare to be boarded. Never, Vextar replied, though his voice shook with fear. The Kelrian Empire does not surrender. Then you will be destroyed. All human ships prepare for final assault. Wait, came a new voice from the Kelrian fleet. Fleet Admiral Noxra had taken control of the communications. This is Fleet Admiral. Noxera, we surrender! All Kelrian ships power down weapons immediately! What are you doing? Vexatar demanded. Saving what's left of our people, Noxera replied firmly. This war is over. We lost the moment we ignored their first warning. Across the Kelrian fleet, ships began powering down their weapons and raising surrender flags. The surviving crews had finally accepted what their leaders refused to acknowledge. They were completely outmatched. Dr. Hayrim powered down the solar weapon and deactivated the planetary shields. The battle for Earth was over, but the transformation of the galaxy was just beginning. Sir, her assistant said quietly, should we begin processing the Kelrian prisoners? Yes, Hayrim replied, but treat them well. They're not our enemies anymore. They're going to help us build a better galaxy. On the Kelrian flagship, War Marshal Vex Tar stared at the defeat screen in stunned silence. His empire was gone, his fleet was destroyed, and his people were at the mercy of the species he had tried to enslave. The humans had been right. There were consequences for ignoring their warning. The price of Kelrian arrogance was the end of everything they had built. But as human boarding parties prepared to take control of his ship, Vexatar began to wonder if perhaps that wasn't entirely a bad thing. Maybe it was time for something better. To take the Empire's place, something guided by species that preferred mercy to conquest, but possessed the strength to enforce their ideals across the stars. Captain Min Ho commanded the largest fleet humanity had ever assembled, as it emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Kelrian home system. Behind him stretched an armada of 5,000 ships, each one representing decades of secret construction and technological advancement. Sir, his tactical officer reported, we have visual contact with Kelria Prime. The Kelrian homeworld appeared on the main screen. A brown and red planet orbited by dozens of space stations and defensive platforms. It was the heart of an empire that had ruled this part of the galaxy for over 3 centuries. Any sign of resistance? Minho asked. Negative, sir. All Kelrian military forces were committed to the Earth invasion. The home system is defended only by planetary militias and police forces. Minho nodded grimly. The Kelrians had made the classic mistake of committing all their forces to a single attack. Now their capital was defenseless against retaliation. All ships, maintain formation. Begin broadcasting the surrender terms. The human fleet moved into the system like a tide of metal and energy. The Kelrian civilians watching from the surface had never seen anything like it. Each human ship was larger and more advanced than the best vessels their empire had ever built. On Kelria Prime, Emergency Chancellor Gorthak stood in the Planetary Defense Center, watching the human fleet approach with growing terror. The reports from Earth had been impossible to believe, but the evidence was right in front of him. Sir, his aide whispered, what are your orders? What orders can I give? Gorthak replied bitterly. We have 300 police cutters against 5,000 battleships. This isn't a battle. It's an execution. The human broadcast reached every communication device on the planet. Captain Minho's voice was calm, but carried absolute authority. People of Kelria Prime, this is Captain Minho of the Earth Defense Force. Your military attempted to invade our system and enslave our people. They have been defeated. Your empire has fallen. We are here to accept your unconditional surrender and begin the process of transitioning your worlds to self-government. Commander Dayun led the first wave of human ships into orbit around the Kelrian home world. Her vessels were equipped with technology that made the planet's defenses look like ancient relics. Sir, her weapons officer reported, the planetary defense grid is targeting us. Let them. Da-Un replied calmly. Activate. Defensive screens. The Kelrian orbital weapons opened fire with everything they had. Massive energy beams and kinetic projectiles struck the human ships, but simply bounced off their shields without causing any damage. Sir, the Kelrian defense coordinator called out frantically, our weapons aren't even scratching their shields. Increase power to maximum, Emergency Chancellor Gorthak ordered. Sir, we're already at maximum power. Our weapons just aren't advanced enough to penetrate their defenses. Da-Un opened a communication channel to the Planetary Defense Center. Kelrian defenders, cease fire immediately. Your weapons cannot harm us, and continued attacks will be considered acts of aggression. This is Emergency Chancellor Gorthak, came the reply. By what right do you invade our sovereign territory? By the right of retaliation, Da-Un answered firmly. Your empire attacked our home without provocation. You ignored our warnings and attempted genocide against our species. Now you face the consequences. Across the galaxy, similar scenes were playing out as human forces reached every major Kelrian world. Dr. Young-A coordinated the massive operation from her command center on Luna Base. Status report from all fronts, she requested. Kelria Prime has ceased resistance, her aide reported. Admiral Seong-min reports successful occupation of the Rigel colonies. Captain Wu Seok has secured the industrial worlds in the Vega sector. Any significant resistance? Minimal. Most Kelrian forces are surrendering immediately when they realize the overwhelming odds. Dr. Young-A studied the strategic display showing human operations across 47 star systems. The plan she had helped develop over 2 decades was working perfectly. What about the liberation operations? She asked. Even more successful than projected. The enslaved species are not only welcoming human forces, they're actively joining our fleets. We've gained over 200,000 auxiliary troops from freed worlds. The revelation about humanity's infiltration network was perhaps the most shocking discovery for the Kelrians. Dr. Young-A had personally overseen the placement of human agents throughout their territory for the past 30 years. Sir, a Kelrian intelligence officer reported to Emergency Chancellor Gorthak, we've identified human operatives in every major government department, military command, and industrial facility. How many? Gorthak asked weakly. Thousands, sir. They've been documenting our activities, studying our technology, and preparing for this invasion for decades. How did we never detect them? They used advanced genetic modification to appear identical to our species. Some of them have been living as Kelrians for so long they probably forgot they were human. The scope of human preparation was becoming clear. This wasn't a hasty response to the Kelrian invasion. It was the culmination of a multi-generational plan to neutralize a threat to galactic peace. Captain Minho received a priority transmission from Earth Command. Admiral Hyun-Woo's face appeared on the screen. Status report, Captain. Kelria Prime is secured, sir. No casualties on either side. The planetary government has formally surrendered. Excellent. What about the civilian population? They seem relieved, sir. Apparently, the Kelrian military government was not popular with its own people. This was another surprise for humanity. The Kelrian Empire had been oppressing not just conquered species, but their own civilians as well. Many Kelrians were actually grateful for human intervention. Sir, Minho's communications officer announced, we're receiving surrender transmissions from Kelrian governors across the Empire. They're offering to cooperate with transitional governments. How many worlds have surrendered without resistance? 31 out of 47, sir. The remaining 16 are expected to surrender within the next few hours. The speed of the Kelrian collapse was unprecedented in galactic history. An empire that had taken centuries to build was crumbling in a matter of days. Commander Da Yun oversaw the peaceful occupation of Kelria Prime's orbital facilities. Human boarding parties were welcomed by Kelrian workers who had been conscripted into military service against their will. "Sir," one of her officers reported, "the Kelrian technicians are asking if they can help us shut down their government's oppression systems." Oppression systems? Surveillance networks, thought control broadcasts, forced labor coordination centers. Apparently, the Empire was using mind control technology on its own people. Da Yun felt a chill run down her spine. Humanity had known. The Kelrians were brutal to conquered species, but they hadn't realized the Empire was enslaving its own population as well. "Begin dismantling all oppression systems immediately," she ordered, "and get our medical teams down there to help any civilians who were harmed by these devices." The liberation of the Kelrian Empire was revealing the true scope of its crimes. Not only had they enslaved dozens of species, they had been using advanced technology to control their own people for generations. Dr. Young-A compiled the final intelligence reports from across the former empire. The numbers were staggering. Over 3 billion sentient beings had been freed from various forms of slavery and oppression. The Kelrian government has been using mind control on their own population for over 200 years, she reported, to Earth Command. Most Kelrians don't even remember what freedom feels like. "What about the enslaved species?" Admiral Hyunwoo asked. 12 species completely enslaved, 43 species under various forms of oppression. They're all requesting human protection while they rebuild their civilizations. Grant all requests. We'll help them establish independent governments and provide security during the transition period. Captain Min-ho stood on the observation deck of his flagship, looking down at Kelria Prime. The planet was already beginning to change. Oppression. Centers were being shut down. Slave facilities were being converted to hospitals and schools, and the people were learning what it meant to be free. "Sir," his aide said quietly, "the former War Marshal Vextar is requesting a meeting." "What does he want?" "He says he wants to formally apologize for the invasion and offer his assistance in transitioning to a peaceful government." Min-ho considered the request. Vextar had been humanity's enemy just days ago, but the war was over. It was time to begin building something better. "Schedule the meeting," he decided, "but make it clear that he'll be held accountable for his crimes. Cooperation now won't erase what he did." The retaliation was complete. The Kelrian Empire was no more, but humanity's real work was just beginning. They had to help dozens of species rebuild their civilizations and create a new order based on freedom rather than oppression. It would take years, maybe decades. But humanity had proven they had the patience and dedication to see it through. After all, they had spent 50 years preparing for a single battle. Building a lasting peace would be their greatest challenge yet. Admiral Hyunwoo stood on the bridge of his flagship in orbit above Kelria Prime, watching history unfold below. 3 months had passed since the Kelrian Empire's surrender, and the transformation had been remarkable. The brown, polluted world was already showing patches of green as human environmental teams worked to repair centuries of damage. "Sir," his communications officer announced, "Former War Marshal Vextar is requesting permission to come aboard for the formal ceremony." "Grant permission," Hyunwoo replied, "but maintain security protocols. The ceremony would mark the official end of the Kelrian Empire and the beginning of a new galactic confederation based on cooperation rather than conquest." Representatives from dozens of species would witness the historic moment. Engineer Tae Young, worked on the surface of New Kelria. As the capital city had been renamed, his team was helping to establish the planet's first democratic government. The task was complicated by the fact that most Kelrians had no experience with freedom or self-determination. "How are the orientation sessions going?" asked his assistant. "Better than expected," Tae-young replied. "Once we shut down the mind control systems, most Kelrians adapted quickly to independent thinking. They're eager to build something better." "What about the former military commanders?" "Mixed results. Some, like Vextar, genuinely want to help. Others are having trouble accepting that their empire is gone. But the majority are cooperating with the transition. The transformation wasn't limited to Kelria Prime. Across the galaxy, human teams were working with local populations to establish new governments and rebuild damaged civilizations. Captain So Young had been appointed as the chief diplomatic coordinator for the transition. Her office in the former Imperial Palace was constantly busy with representatives from liberated worlds. "Ambassador Thrix of the Andorian Republic is here to see you," her aide announced. "Send him in." The Andorian was a tall, blue-skinned humanoid whose species had been enslaved by the Kelrians for over 50 years. He entered the office with obvious nervousness. "Captain So Young," he said formally, "my people are concerned about the future. We are grateful for our freedom, but we worry about what happens when human forces leave our world." "That's understandable," So Young replied gently. "But you won't be alone. We're establishing a mutual defense pact between all liberated worlds. If any of you are threatened, the others will come to your aid. And if we have disputes with each other, that's what the new Galactic Council is for. Peaceful resolution of conflicts through negotiation and compromise, not conquest." The Andorian looked relieved. "My people have forgotten how to live in peace. Will you help us remember?" "Of course. That's why we're here." Similar conversations were happening throughout the former empire as species that had been enemies for generations learned to work together as equals. Dr. Yoon-ji coordinated the massive humanitarian effort from her new headquarters on Luna Base. The scale of the operation was unprecedented in galactic history. "Status report from the medical teams," she requested. "Sir, we've treated over 50 million individuals for the effects of mind control technology," her aide reported. "Another 200 million are receiving psychological counseling to help them adjust to freedom." "What about the infrastructure repairs?" "Proceeding ahead of schedule. The former slave worlds are eager to help rebuild. They're working alongside our engineering teams voluntarily." "Any problems with the transition governments?" "Surprisingly few. Most species are adapting well to democracy. The biggest challenge is convincing them they don't need our permission to make their own decisions." The final ceremony took place in the Great Hall of the former Imperial Palace. Representatives from every liberated world gathered to witness the signing of the Galactic Cooperation Charter. Admiral Yun Wu stood at the podium, looking out at the diverse crowd of beings who had once been enemies but were now working toward a common future. "Today marks the end of an age of oppression and the beginning of an era of cooperation," he began. "The Kelrian Empire fell not because humanity sought conquest, but because all beings deserve the right to live free from fear and oppression." Former War Marshal Vextar approached the podium when his name was called. He looked older and more tired than he had during the invasion, but there was something new in his eyes. "Hope, I stand before you as a symbol of the old ways," he said in a voice that carried throughout the hall. "I believed that strength meant the ability to dominate others. I thought conquest was the natural order of the universe." He paused, looking around at the faces of species his empire had oppressed I was wrong. True strength comes from the courage to show mercy when you have the power to destroy. True leadership means helping others become strong, not keeping them weak. He turned to Admiral Hyunwoo. Humanity defeated our empire in a matter of days. You could have destroyed us completely. Instead, you chose to help us become better. That is a strength we never possessed. Captain Tae-young watched the ceremony from his engineering station on Kelria Prime. His teams had worked around the clock to establish the communication networks that allowed beings across the galaxy to participate in the historic moment. "Sir," his assistant said quietly, "we're receiving gratitude messages from every liberated world. They want to thank humanity for giving them back their freedom." "Send a reply," Tae-young instructed. "Tell them that freedom was always theirs. We just helped them remember how to use it." The Galactic Cooperation Charter was signed by representatives of 47 species, including the Kelrians themselves. The document established principles of mutual respect, peaceful conflict resolution, and shared defense against any future threats. Admiral Hyunwoo signed last, representing humanity. As he put down the pen, he reflected on the long journey that had brought them to this moment. "Sir," Captain So-young approached him after the ceremony. "What's next for humanity?" "The same thing we've always done," Hyunwoo replied. "We go home, live our lives, and hope for peace. But we stay ready in case someone else decides to threaten the innocent. And if they do, then they'll learn the same lesson the Kelrians learned. Humanity prefers peace, but we're very good at war when necessary. The new galactic order was far from perfect. There would be disputes, misunderstandings, and challenges ahead. But for the first time in centuries, dozens of species had hope for a better future." Dr. Young-A compiled the final report on the transition process for Earth Command. The numbers told an incredible story of transformation and healing. The former, "Kelrian Empire has been successfully dissolved," she wrote. 47 worlds have established democratic governments. 3 billion beings have been freed from various forms of oppression. 0 casualties have been reported in the post-war period. But the most important statistic wasn't in the official reports. It was the simple fact that children on dozens of worlds were growing up free, learning to think for themselves and dream of futures their parents had never been allowed to imagine. The Kelrian invasion had been intended to destroy humanity. Instead, it had led to the liberation of half the galaxy. The species that had tried to harvest humans as slaves had learned a valuable lesson. Never mistake kindness for weakness. On Earth, life returned to normal. People went to work, children went to school, and the great defensive systems went back into hiding. But the galaxy was watching now, and the message was clear. Humanity was a peaceful species that preferred cooperation to conflict. But they possessed the strength to enforce their ideals across the stars. They had given the Kelrian Empire a warning, and when it was ignored, they had delivered consequences beyond imagination. The former War Marshal Vex Tar established a new home on a small farm outside New Kelria's capital city. He spent his days teaching young Kelrians about the importance of peace and the dangers of unchecked ambition. Sometimes, on clear nights, he would look up at the stars and remember the massive human fleet that had appeared from nowhere to humble his empire. He had learned something that day that would stay with him forever. The most dangerous enemies were not the ones who showed their strength. They were the ones who possessed overwhelming power, but chose to keep it hidden until the very moment it was needed. Humanity had been that enemy. But they had also become the galaxy's greatest hope for lasting peace. And in the end, that made all the difference.